Welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast, where we empower you to build a better ranch and transform your operations into a thriving business. I'm your host, John Haskell. Let's get started. Okay, welcome to the Ranchonomics Podcast. We are here today with Wally Olson and Joel Ham. And Joel, I am super excited to have you here. Wally, it's always good to have you. How are you this morning?
Very good.
Very good. Joel Ham is from Big Lake, Texas. And Joel, if you'd give us a little introduction to yourself, that'd be great. And we're going to jump in and talk about your philosophy of ranching.
Okay, I'm in Big Lakes in West Texas. I wouldn't say far West Texas, but it's in a pretty arid environment. I've been here. My great-grandfather came here in 1898. So we've been here a while, and I'm still on land he settled. And it's pretty... about 15-inch annual rainfall, whatever that is, but it's very high evaporation rate. So it would be about like 6 inches in Nebraska or somewhere.
And the big lake that is the local landmark is a bit of an exaggeration, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it was full. It was probably the largest natural lake. It wasn't very deep, but it was about 3 miles long, but it was filled with 3 springs and was kind of a landmark because it was only water for several hundred miles, natural water. Just through the damage to the water cycle through the years, it's down to just catches water when we have high rainfall.
Right.
But it doesn't hold water very long. So it's basically a dry lake bed.
It's more like a big lake bed. Yeah, that's right. Very good. All right. Well, you've had a wonderful set of mentors and a pretty interesting educational experience as you've gone through your ranching career. You want to talk a little about that? What kind of got you? How'd you start, and what'd you learn along the way?
Well, I was pretty fortunate. I went to some holistic management courses in the early '80s. The thing that opened my eyes was that if you're ranching, the unit of land has to be the land has to be the unit of production, not the animal. And I saw that as where we'd went wrong, not seeing the land as the unit of production. And the result of that is, through the years, stocking rates have gotten lower and lower, and so low that ranching in West Texas was just really wasn't economically viable. So you've got to get the land producing more, not we got the animals doing all they can do, and we've got to get the land producing more. Along about the time we were getting started doing that, we had put some cattle together into a large herd, and we found out that we weren't very good cowboys. We've met Bud Williams about the time I really needed him. And Alan Savory, he came to West Texas late 70s, early 80s, and a lot of people got involved, but they missed a lot of what he was teaching. And I think that stockmanship was the thing that caused most of them to fail. Because once they got their cattle or sheep, whatever, into one big herd, they didn't know how to handle them, and they got frustrated after a few years and just finally went back to conventional set stocking. But I saw, when I talked to Bud, I saw that he was describing problems that I had, and he'd never been here. And it was kind of a long, slow learning process. But I saw that if we were going to do that, we had to know what he was teaching. It was an essential part.
Yeah. And I had that same experience. As you get into grazing planning and trying to manage your grazing correctly, then the next thing that has to happen is you got to be able to get animals from one place to another, right?
Right.
And if you can't work with them, you can't move them.
It seems it doesn't matter how good the grazing is. If you don't handle them right, they just won't do well. And I've witnessed that firsthand. It's hard to explain to somebody, but the performance just goes way down.
Yep. I want to jump back for a minute for what you said about the unit of the land being the unit of production or analysis versus the animal. And I just want to clarify for people that are listening, what we often see in kind of an extension model approach, and even in the like SPA model and all, is that we look at the profitability, for example, and other metrics per animal. And what can happen there is that your profitability per animal could be going up, but your profitability per acre could be going down, right? And the opposite too, right? Your profitability per animal can be going down while your profitability per acre could be going up. And those aren't necessarily opposed. They both can go up. They both can go down. But what we wind up happening is if you have a land base that you own or lease or pay for, when the productivity of that declines, that actually has a much larger effect than the individual animal, correct?
Yes.
And so when we look at gross profit per or gross margin per acre, that's where we're seeing the real impact ultimately on our bottom line, right?
Right. And what we were seeing here in West Texas, and is still probably pretty common, is both sides were going down.
Yeah, profitability per animal and profitability per acre. Right.
Right.
Yep, very good. Okay, and again, that goes back to the basic idea that if you can run more animals on the same piece of land, right, you have the opportunity to increase turnover, and that's where we get into grazing management and stockmanship and some of these things that allow us to really improve our gross profit per unit of land, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The increasing the production per acre has a far greater benefit than increasing the animal performance.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. And most people pay their mortgage, kind of per acre, not per animal.
Right.
Yeah, very good. All right, so you met Bud, and Bud kind of showed up at your place, right? Did you invite him down? How did you get him there?
Yeah, I did. I met him in 1989. I met
Yeah.
him at Guy Glosson was working on the Mesquite Grove Ranch up at Claremont, which is it's east of Post, Texas, which is southeast of Lubbock. They invited us over. They had seen Bud do a demonstration somewhere at a cattleman's meeting, and so we went and spent the day. I was intrigued. I was kind of a follower of Ray Hunt horsemanship about that time, and so I'd never thought of working with cattle like Ray worked with the horse instead of against him, and I'd never considered that with cattle, and I just immediately saw that that's what he was doing. So I was intrigued, and I was about to move several loads of cattle from here up to the panhandle of Texas, about 300 miles. And in talking with him that day, I said, I'm about to move a bunch of cows, and it sounds like that you could be of some help doing that. He said, absolutely. So I just had him come down, and he helped us load the cows and haul them over there. It's 300-mile haul. And so and they were pairs, about 300-pound calves, and the cows were not gentle cows. We handle them a lot, but I wouldn't call them gentle. And when we got there, it was mid-afternoon. He kind of looked around, and we were going to turn them out in about a 2-section pasture there at the corrals. And I think he did this to get me out of the way. He said, why don't you go up to the house and take care of your business? And he said, I'm going to turn these cows out, and you just come find me out here somewhere. And so he went out on foot in front of 185 pairs that had just been hauled 300 miles and probably weren't very happy. He went out on foot and settled those cows, and I went and found him right about dark. He had those cows, they were all grazing in just a few acres. And so we went and got a room, came back early the next morning, and those cows were still right there. They had not walked the fence. Everything was mated up, and we got out and walked through them. He showed me how to walk through them. And as we were walking through them, if anything, their expression looked like we were bothering them, then we just immediately changed our angle. And we just kind of walked in the gaps between the cows. And we were laying down, we got them up. And every cow and every calf was mated up. And they had not walked the fence, and they were just happy. They looked like they'd been raised there. I was sold from that time on that I had to learn what Bud was teaching. And, I was pretty excited about it. And I would tell people about it, and nobody was really interested. And so I just made the decision one day. I said, I don't care if anybody else is interested in this. I'm gonna keep in touch with this guy, and I'm gonna learn it for me because I need it. And so it was years before he ever taught any courses after that. It was my learning curve was very slow, and there's a lot of things. Once I finally went to some courses, I saw some things that I had missed because I had personal contact, but he hadn't developed his teaching method. He was still kind of going on his level. And as he began putting on schools, he realized he had to get down on everybody else's level. But I did. I learned enough to kind of be dangerous in those early years, but thank goodness I kept doing it. Now I do things all the time by myself or with one other person that normally would have taken 3 or 4 people. And we just don't have the ranch labor in this area that we had when I was growing up. Everybody went to work in the oil field and make more money. And I couldn't think of one guy in this county that I could hire to help me, with any livestock work that would be of any help.
Yeah, interesting. As you think back on the stuff you learned with Bud, give us some of the What are some of the most important elements? What are the pieces that really, the few pieces that make the biggest difference?
The key thing is in order to do what he does, you have to take responsibility for your results. If you can't understand that, don't even get started
Oh
because
man, yeah.
you can't watch a video, a bud, or a demonstration and then go retrace his steps and make it work because it's not going to be the same. You have to read and respond to the cattle. I've heard people say, well, we tried that low stress stockmanship stuff. It didn't work. I don't tell them this, but I'm just thinking, no, it tried you and you didn't work.
Yeah, it cracks you up when people say that. You just have to think to yourself, well, maybe.
Yeah, because they think it's a system and there's you can't put anything systemic on something as dynamic as ours. And you have to read and respond to cattle, but you also have to understand their natural tendencies. Basically, the principles of what he's doing is you're fixing it up where the animals want to go, where do you want them to go? And the hardest thing is to get out of trying to force them to go where you want to go. And I struggled with that. I still have to check on myself because I'll get in the jam and I'll realize, I'm trying to force these cattle or these sheep and instead of fixing it up where they want to go there.
Yeah, and that's the exact same thing Ray talked about all the time, right?
Right. Yeah. He talked about, and with a horse, he said, fix it up and let him find it.
Yep.
And once they
And then they
find it,
just do it. Yeah.
once they find it, they're just happy to go there.
Yeah, I love it. Good. What else?
If you're loading cattle on a truck, if they want to go on that truck, they're going to ride a lot happier. I bought a load of heifers one time off the video, came out of southern Colorado, and I was there when they when they loaded them, and they handled those cattle really, really rough. And as a matter of fact, we were sorting them. We had to be careful because they'd stack up about 3 deep in the alley. They were so upset, and they loaded them on the truck. And then when they got here, when we opened the back of the truck, we were 30 minutes getting the first calf off the truck. They all had their heads buried and were mashing to the center, and they were pushing. And so they had ridden like that all the way from Colorado. So you can imagine. But it's because they weren't loaded right. They didn't want to go in there, and they got in there, and they didn't know what to do.
Yep. And then once they were in there, they didn't want to come out, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's too bad. What else? Let's go to grass management for a little bit, because again, your time with Savory and Parsons and that group early on, what did you learn about grass management, pasture management?
Well, it's the same as Bud Williams stockmanship. You got to take the responsibility of the results you get, and that's here in West Texas. People went and built fences and thought that their grass would grow tall, and it didn't, and they all blamed Savory. But you have to do the grazing planning. You have to do the management and the monitoring, just like stockmanship. You have to do your part and read and respond. And then it will probably the hardest thing is watching those grazing plans. They'll tell you when you're overstocked. And boy, every time that I have not heeded that, it has cost me dearly in time because I could have, I kept cattle way longer than I should have. And then here, it may take you a year to recover or longer if you make a mistake.
Yeah, it's not like Missouri or Northeast Oklahoma where it just pops right back, right?
Right. You can't count on the rain in 2 weeks to fix your mess.
Yep. Very good. All right. What else?
Well, we run cattle and sheep both. I'm kind of on the edge of the sheep country. So, and I don't have any really figures to show it. Bob Steger always said you could run 1 sheep for every cow. You had not affect your stocking rate, but I think you can run. I do think you can run more animal units if you combine sheep. It's a little more trouble. I run them together. It's not that hard to do, but it is unhandy. We have a lot of cows, so we have to keep guard dogs with them, but that does increase your overall stocking rate by adding sheep.
And tell me a little about your sheep enterprise. So are you using lambs or are you running feeders? What are you doing there?
I'm running ewes and lambs. I don't have many now. I used to run about 1,200 ewes.
Okay. Hair sheep, wool sheep?
These were hair sheep wool sheep first. And then I phased out the wool sheep in the mid-90s.
Okay.
And then went back to buying some hair sheep in the early 2000s, really about the time the Dorpers started coming in. My intention was I was just buying Barbados sheep and mixed breeds of hair sheep. And then the Dorpers came along, and so I started buying some Royal White bucks and putting on them, and they improved really fast. But the coyotes were moving in here. Everybody went out of the sheep business, so nobody was keeping the coyotes down. And I began to see that I couldn't continue to lamb out in the pasture. I had to do something. So I cut my sheep numbers down to around 800 or so and started bringing them in and putting them in traps and some of them in pens. And that worked pretty good. But I could also see that if I hit a dry year, that I was going to be in a jam because these small pastures, they won't keep them very long. And you can't drive out and feed a bunch of sheep out if they're lambing in a small area. We did all my life, but they were scattered out in, 4 and 5 cent pastures. So then I had some pens here. I added some feedlot pens and I added on to them and I started bringing them into the pens. And then, like Wally says, you have to know yourself. And then one day I realized, I said, I don't really like being down here for 30 days, 7 days a week from early in the morning and quitting about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And so I kind of phased my sheep down to lower number. I've got about 220 now, but normally about 300 is kind of what I can lamb those and live with it. And my philosophy on this is my youngest daughter really liked the sheep, and she would come home from school and she would notice that there was fewer sheep. She'd say, "Dad, what happened to the sheep?" And I said, "Well, I sold a few." And then the next time she'd come, I would have a few less. And finally one day she said, "Dad, you're selling all the sheep." And I said, "Well, I haven't sold all of them." She said, "Well, we don't have very many." And I said, "Well, how many do you want?" And she said, "Well, a lot more than we have." And I said, "Well, you tell me how many you want and I'll go buy them. Become June 1st when they start lambing, you be here and, and you can run the lambing pens and I'm going to go fishing." She said, "Yeah, I see what you mean." So that's kind
It
of
all makes sense now.
I'd rather run cattle. I'm just kind of a cowboy at heart. And so that just fades the sheep have made more money than cattle all along. It just takes a little more management here. But right now, it's pretty close tied between a cow and a sheep. But I could run more, but you have to lamb them in the pens in order to raise them. I can raise as many sheep as I want once I get them lambed. I just haven't figured out a good way that I can enjoy that to get the lambs out of them and get them going. I know people know because they did it for years with large herds of several thousand, and they did it with wolves and coyotes. But I don't know how, and that's probably for somebody else to figure out.
Yeah, very good. All right. Any other components of as you're thinking about ranch management and how to be successful in this? What are the other things you think about?
Let me say one thing about the sheep.
Yeah.
The reason I started lambing in the pens, it's cheaper to protect the sheep than it is to kill the coyotes.
Yeah.
The whole sheep industry in West Texas are focused on killing all the coyotes.
Yep.
And you're not going to. I'm in a fringe area, and so I don't even trap them or snare them or kill them or anything. Because if I'm going along here and I'm not losing any sheep, if I kill those resident coyotes, something else is going to move in. And so I just leave well enough alone, and they know my dogs. They move out when I move the sheep herd in with the dogs. The coyotes move out, and everything's fine. So I don't waste any time. I'm not opposed to killing a coyote. I like to hunt as much as everybody else, but I'm not going to spend any of my time going out there trying to kill them all.
Yeah. And we see this a lot in different places, right? Whether it's pasture management or weed management or, predators, you can spend an incredible amount of time, effort, and energy fighting against what you don't want. And that usually doesn't work as well as working for what you do want, right?
That's a good philosophy there.
Yeah. Very good. Well, what else? What are the other things you think about in ranch management, land management, animal management, that sort of thing?
Well, we were just cow-calf and ewe lamb operators. That's my granddad was, my dad was, and that's this whole area. We were not very many stocker cattle. I've just seen that you have to be open and willing to do anything because things change, especially here where the rainfall is pretty erratic. It's pretty nice to to just be able to ship a load of calves out and not have to feed a bunch of cows and figure out how to keep the cows. So I think running a combination is pretty essential for this area. Now that may not be for every area, but for this area, it really is. The challenging thing is the numbers have gotten so low in the western half of Texas that you have to go out of the area to get enough cattle.
Yeah. And then when you bring them in, you have to get them used to West Texas, right?
Yeah. But that's not too hard. It's dry, pretty healthy. It seems like this is probably one of the easiest places to bring unless you just bring them from too far east. But they seem to, I get calves from Alabama and they seem to do pretty well once I get them lined out.
Yeah, that's cool. So this idea that we take full responsibility for the outcome is a tough one for a lot of people. I think over and over again, I've seen that writ true in my life, where when I don't do that, things don't work very well. And when I do, even if it seems ridiculous, things sure work out better. And I think you've seen that same thing, right? And whether it's horsemanship or stockmanship or grass management, you're the one that drives this bus, whether you choose to or not, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And most people just really, really hate to see that. I think deep down, most everybody knows it, but very few people will accept that. And if I'm moving some cattle and they're scattering or stopping to graze and I'm having trouble, I'm looking for what I'm doing. Where am I missing it? And if you'll keep working at it, you'll figure it out. It may take a little while, but many years ago, I wouldn't see it for a long time, and now I'm getting to where sometimes I'll see it within 30 minutes. I'll figure out and the same thing with management. If you'll start looking at what you're doing and then kind of look back at what you've done, you say, whoops, this is where I missed it. I should have done this. And with stockmanship, when something went wrong, you can go back and think, what was the last thing I did before this happened? And you can do that in ranch management too. What was the last thing I did before things? And sometimes you can see something definite, and sometimes it just didn't rain, and you just didn't react to that quick, because you always say, well, if it rains tomorrow or if it rains next week, things will be different. And I did that a lot, but that's a pretty poor ranching philosophy in West Texas.
Ranching on hope in West Texas is maybe not the best strategy.
Right.
I love Ray Hunt's he always would ask the question about what happened before what happened, and it's just learning how to look back and kind of rewind and look for those critical points where maybe things started down the wrong way before it looked like they were going the wrong way, right?
That's right. And I'm getting a little older now, and I'm glad I started practicing that earlier, because I can see that when you get my age, if you haven't done it, you probably will not be able to make the
hard change to make.
Yeah, you will not be. Your ego won't let you.
Yeah,
go there.
Yeah, very good. Wally, anything you want to add to this?
Well, one thing I think Joel is pointing out here is, gaining knowledge. You could sit around and think, but you could go into Savory's course and ranching for profit, it puts it together, and then you get involved with Bud Williams, you can just rapidly gain knowledge, and then you implement it and have the right, correct attitude. And it's amazing what you can do. Like Joel talks about working cattle by himself, that's what I've developed. If I'd get a load of calves in, I'd just work them by myself. I didn't need a crew. It's amazing how that can change your profitability and stuff. So,
yep, great, excellent. Joel, anything else we should talk about before we sign off?
No, I just want to emphasize the key word Wally used there is go learn that stuff and then implement it. Whether it's stockmanship or grazing management or sell by marketing, you just have to go do it and understand that you're going to make some mistakes initially and just learn from them and move on. But you have to be doing it and practice. It won't fall on you.
Yeah. And it is that first part we learned from holistic resource management, right? Which is you sort of make a plan, and then you do the plan, and then you look at what happened, and then you replan, right? We just go around that cycle over and over again.
And that's where most of us fail, is the replanning part.
Correct. And I feel like I see more and more people failing in the watching and the observing part. what happened? Did it go well or did it not? And if you skip that part or you don't see stuff, then you're at a real disadvantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Joel, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Wally, thank you for being here today. And look forward to more conversations. So you two have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
You bet.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you for tuning into the Ranchnomics podcast. We hope this episode helped you win today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend.